All right, I think we can get started here. Looks like we've got everyone, and yeah, just real quickly, wanted to express our excitement with the group that we've got together today. We are going to be talking about the multi-chain ecosystem, cross-chain liquidity, and also getting into a little bit about protocols as well and like standards. So really interesting topics. First off, we'll have the group of speakers kind of introduce themselves here. So I'll hand it off to others for that.
Oh yeah, I can go first. I'm overqualified with Alchemix, COO at Alchemix. Been around crypto since roughly 2017. And yeah, I basically just cat herd people.
Nice.
I'm Scoopy Triples, one of the co-founders of Alchemix, and I wear many hats in the organization, and also listen to the chief cat herder as well.
Great. Someone from Connects? Do you have Arjun?
I don't see us having a speaker from the Connects team up. Let me ask Matt here.
Lucas?
Yeah, I want to be part of the cat herding team as well. Sounds like fun. But Lucas, founding contributor to Renzo, leading restaking protocol on EigenLayer that launched earlier this year. We have been building with the Connects team and with Consensus and MetaMask, and are now on 7 chains, including Arbitrum, Mode, Base, BNB, Linnea, and I'm missing one, Blast. And on a lot of those chains, EasyETH is the leading or the largest LRT from an adoption standpoint. So appreciate you guys having us on.
Great. Let's see. Do we have anyone from Connect yet, or? I think if not, we can probably go ahead and.
Looks like someone's coming on.
Okay.
I'm trying to reach out.
Yeah, I'm talking to Matt.
Just some more cat herding.
Yeah. Good thing we have cat herding.
There we go. We got Arjun now.
There he is.
GM folks.
Hey.
Hey, Arjun.
Just doing intros. If you could just give a quick intro.
Hey, friends. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Arjun was a couple minutes late, and so wanted to hop in, but it looks like he's joined. So, Arjun, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. I'm Arjun. I'm one of the founders of Connects. Nice. Okay. Sorry. My ex was having a lot of issues with this space and telling me that it didn't exist and that there was nobody in it. But now I'm seeing that there are people in it. So that's great. Sorry. I'm Arjun. I'm one of the founders of Connects. Connects is a protocol for, basically trying to abstract away the interchain experience. We are one of the first intent-based interoperability protocols. We've been building in this, around this topic since 2021. A big part of what we try to do is work towards building better standards around the ways that people can do things like transfer assets across chains. And one of those standards is xERC 20, of course. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to jump into this with some of the other folks that are up here.
Perfect. With that, yeah, let's start with. I think most of the group here and probably the listeners are familiar with ERC20 tokens. Can we dive into the xERC20 token and what that is and kind of where it's at right now?
Absolutely. Does anyone have any desire to give an initial intro? If not, I can try to give some high level context.
I think you're the guy for it. You invented it, right?
Awesome. So xERC 20 is basically an attempt to try to build a simple shared language for how we try to send tokens across chains. So the world we live in today is kind of really, I mean, it's obviously super fragmented. When you bridge your token across chains as a project, you're sort of faced with this extremely like perplexing challenge where you have the option of either like bridging through a canonical bridge to get to a new ecosystem, which is great because you get like fantastic security, but then you're kind of like locked into working with that canonical bridge, and that means, of course, like needing to take on like a 7-day exit if you're working with optimistic rollup, or having to like, you know, for example, for a lot of chains, like their bridges are not able to support like custom tokens very easily and things like that. So you're basically like locked into this very cookie cutter approach towards getting tokens to a rollup. And then of course, if you want to then have seamless transferability out of the rollup or between rollups, then you have to pay for a bunch of liquidity. So it's like this, you can either go the standard route that is very secure, but then you have trade-offs in terms of user experience and liquidity. Or alternatively, in the past, you could kind of go with like working directly with some like interoperability protocol, like Layer 0 or multi-chain or Wormhole or whatever, where you would issue the token directly with their project. And while the latter option is like fantastic for a lot of reasons, of course, that implies some trade-offs in terms of security. So I think we kind of saw this with like multi-chain last year, where when the multi-chain incident occurred, I'm still not quite sure whether to call it a hack or not, but when the incident occurred, like a lot of projects, including Alchemix, and I really would love for you guys to speak to this, a lot of projects ended up in this like challenging situation where they were like, well, we've issued this token through multi-chain and we don't have a way to kind of get it out. And so what xERC 20 tries to do is it tries to find the midpoint between these two, this kind of really awful dilemma where it says, here is a very minimal interface for being able to bridge tokens across chains where you can allow for the token issuer, this could be the DAO or the core project that's launching the token, to be able to specify which bridges they want to work with, to change their minds about which bridges they want to work with, and to be able to work with multiple bridges at once using rate limits. So basically using the ability to limit how many tokens a given bridge could mint in order to constrain the risk, like the security risks of any given bridge. The goal with the standard, as a final note here, is to try to be, I mean, there's obviously a lot of token standards out there, but the goal with this was like, it's an EIP, it's meant to be a very minimum viable interface, and like other standards like OFTs and things like that, or other kind of like proprietary token models can build on top of it by just leveraging some of the same heuristics.
Yeah, I think to kind of touch on that, like Arjun said, we got hit by the multi-chain exploit, which was liquidity-based bridging, where ultimately we did not own the addresses that held the liquidity. And so I think what xERC 20 does is it kind of separates the bridge service from the ownership, where the DAO actually owns the ability to say which bridges can be used. It can remove bridges, add other bridges. And then ultimately the DAO also owns the contracts, where relevant, that hold liquidity, or the contracts that are allowed to mint and burn these assets. So that's been quite big. And the last thing I'll say on that is it is super simple, like Arjun said, to the point where as we're working on a tokenomics upgrade that will include the ability to do on-chain governance. And this is the xERC 20 system is one of the first things we're looking at to put to on-chain governance, just because it's a pretty simple system that lends itself pretty well to on-chain governance rather than needing like owners and stuff and admins.
Yeah, and if I can add to that a bit, like in the aftermath of the multi-chain incident hack, like there was this profound feeling of helplessness, and also like just this lack of any clarity or information. Even to this day, we don't know if those funds that are still in the multi-chain, like addresses are ever going to be released. Or if they're black holed forever. And then this creates a lot of uncertainty for us, and we have to assume that these funds will be released, and that caused a lot of pain for us as a protocol and DAO trying to deal with all that stuff. And I think just like the fact that xERC 20 allows the protocol to remain sovereign over their own issued assets is its real selling point. At no point will we ever be like in the same situation in multi-chain, because we can change the contracts, change the bridges, because we have control over the assets on other layers. And I think that's really an underappreciated point of this of Connext.
Great. Yeah. I think that helps to sort of frame some of the issues. And it sounds like it was born out of a bit of a black swan event. Coming from the MetaMask side, and by the way, forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Vandan and lead the wallet API product for MetaMask. And that's the API that developers use to integrate with, basically communicate with MetaMask. When we think about the wallet side, there's even just, it seems like a bit of complexity for the average user to understand, tokens that reside on different chains. And that's something that we've been thinking about as well. Is like, how do you sort of simplify this concept? Is that part of the thinking, with xERC 22? Is anything on the just like kind of average user side?
I think so. Like, part of where that complexity comes from is this like core problem of what do you do when there's just multiple representations of the same token on a single chain, right? And like, that should just be considered a failure of the system, that like the incentives that we've created, that like you can end up in a world where there's like, 5 or 6 different versions of USDC and you don't know which one to give to the user. Or even worse, like there's been cases in the past, like I know that Lucas, you dealt with this with like Moonwell, where like you can have chains where there's just like no canonical asset, there's no canonical representation of USDC, and so now you have to think about like, for each pool there is a different version of USDC that people are trying to build liquidity against, and you need to route user transactions to the right pool, and it's a huge mess. So I think like, from a user experience perspective, from my view, that's really the big one, is like, if it should be there should just be like the token issuer is already the person that sort of says like, okay, XYZ version of this asset is the official one. And there's already this like soft shelling point that gets created around this. And if we don't find a way to like enshrine that, then you still end up with this like complex world. And so this approach just tries to enshrine that a bit better, that says, to say like, okay, the DAO can explicitly say this is the right version, and they can allow multiple projects to work with it. So there's no incentives to fragment anymore.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I've definitely seen some of the questionable token contracts floating on various chains that like probably are trying to emulate some token on another chain. So that's definitely an issue.
Yeah, there's 2 things that we're talking about here, and as Arjun kind of mentioned, I have a perspective now from when I was at Moonwell. Moonwell is a lending protocol that I was a founding contributor to, and we launched on Moonriver and Moonbeam, so Polkadot Kusama. And essentially we had two big issues that we were trying to deal with, that now, contributing to Renzo and working with the Connext team is night and day. So the first one was this fragmentation of liquidity. So, I literally spent months in the Moonbeam ecosystem trying to come up with a naming convention to be able to even identify the different, it wasn't just USDC, it was ETH, it was USDC and everything else. And we had Frax, we had multi-chain, we had Nomad, we had Axelar. I think there was like 4 or 5 of every single, like key asset, being USDC, wrap Bitcoin and ETH. And the fragmentation, well, the user experience is just horrible because people literally don't know which asset to use. But the harder thing is the fragmentation of liquidity that is created through that as well. And how do you actually, to be able to incentivize liquidity is super expensive. And given like Moonwell being a lending protocol, you need deep liquidity for flash loans to occur on Compound, right? Which Moonwell is a Compound V2. And, so yeah, a complete nightmare. And now working with the Connects team, we've actually been able to solve for that problem. And xETH, even though it's across 7 chains, it's not fragmented, and it's significantly helped with the adoption that we've seen with xETH, on all these rollups. And then on the other side, which is maybe where I should have started from a security standpoint, the other, incident that I was, I don't know what the right word is, but when the Nomad Bridge exploit happened on Polkadot on Moonbeam, there was no way for the ecosystem or ecosystem projects to be able to have any kind of guarantees around security on Nomad. And essentially what ended up happening on Nomad, this is 2 years ago, August 1st, I'll never forget it, is they didn't have a way to actually stop assets or the collateral from flowing out of the bridge. And the reason that's really important, working with the Connects team, the Renzo protocol actually is able to set different security parameters that they're comfortable with around minting and burning of xETH as deposits are coming in, whether that's supply or deposit caps around how much xETH and different kind of triggers. But having that control and having that flexibility to be able to control things on the security side, on the engineering side at Renzo was a huge reason why we decided to go with Connects as well. So yeah, night and day from building on Moonbeam and Polkadot for a few years, and now building with Connects team on mainnet.
This is actually really great for us too, because I guess regardless of how much you secure your protocol, right? You can do as many audits as you like, and you can have your protocol, exist in the market with Lindy effect and capital available there for as long as you want. There's always going to be some risk that there's an exploit or vulnerability. And this exists with the internet today. We're still finding vulnerabilities in internet protocols that were written 20 years ago, which is a huge problem. The really, really reassuring thing about this model is that for us, right, there's almost $900 million of liquidity that has been bridged across chains. Largely, a lot of that is xETH. Normally, as a protocol, when you start getting to those numbers, you start getting it's anxiety producing, right? You can constrain that risk, and there are obviously multiple multi-billion-dollar protocols out there, but it is anxiety producing in the sense that you're okay, this is capital. This is now a bounty for attackers. Whereas for us, I think we're super reassured by the fact that while it's true that technically speaking, $900 million of value has been bridged via Connects, in practice, even in the worst case scenario, only a smaller percentage of that could actually be stolen, simply because there are limits available, and that there's a capacity for Renzo and other protocols to be able to respond to this happening in real time, to be able to delist Connects as an option, and reduce mitigate the impact of a hack.
I see. Yeah, that's fascinating. It sounds like it's creating a kind of improved developer experience for the Renzo team at least. Also, I mean, it sounds like one counterpoint to just L2 scaling has been liquidity fragmentation being this trade-off. Is this potentially kind of a solution? Or is it aiming to be a solution to that problem?
That's an interesting and challenging question. It can be a solution if everybody uses the standard. Will everyone use the standard? No. I mean, it's just not going to happen. I don't think that was ever in the cards, just because of how competitive and fragmented the space is. However, the goal here is for a lot of cases, it can be really helpful. So if you're launching a new chain, you can support xERC 20 out of the box for all of your assets, and that can help really significantly reduce the overhead involved with liquidity. That can also like improve your ability to work with bridges significantly. If more bridges start supporting, even for their own proprietary standards, start supporting xERC20 like semantics, then it can create a system that is like more, like basically just like more opt-in and with less lock-in. And that's great for everybody, right? It just means that there's like more competition in the long run to work towards having, like better and better security models over time. I think realistically, it's not going to be a silver bullet. Like xERC20 doesn't work for a lot of cases. For example, with ETH, there is no token issuer. I mean, the token issuer is technically, I guess, the Ethereum Foundation, but you would not want them to have like minting rights over ETH. That would be insane. And like you could have like the ETH blockchain itself sort of like govern minting limits and things like that for ETH, but that would be like way overkill. So that's an example where it just doesn't really work, right? And I think there's a lot of other assets like that are just not governed, that where it wouldn't make sense to have an xERC20. But, for any instance where you have like assets that you want to kind of be like things like Easy ETH, where assets are foundational to DeFi, things like ALUSD, and ALETH, where you're sort of like using this as a collateral base for other protocols and other chains. And then also like longer tail tokens, like for example, governance tokens, right? Like, are people going to want to build significant liquidity for governance tokens? No, it doesn't make sense to like pay for that liquidity. Also, probably not. So for those kinds of cases, this is extremely helpful.
Great. Yeah, this sounds like, yeah, it's a big challenge, but it sounds like there's progress here with xERC20. Going into one thing we're curious about, because we've been involved in especially EIPs, and also starting to think about the multi-chain world for standards. Can you talk a little bit about the process of navigating, introducing a proposal and kind of how that's going so far?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of the process is just, so I guess the process end to end with proposing an EIP is to like work towards getting a lot of public feedback and then creating a proposal around like a shared standard that you think is going to be like basically minimally obtrusive, ideally as much as possible, and then also as neutral as possible. EIP maintainers are not going to like accept something that is proprietary or accept something that in any way like preferentially works with like one project versus another. And then after that, it's basically like an ongoing process of like collecting feedback once it's in like the public RFC phase and continuing to iterate on it until it can basically be finalized. I think like, working with Renzo, working with Alchemix, working with other folks that have been like playing with or actively using xERC20s has helped a ton, because we've just gotten a ton of feedback around like what are the right ways to think about this problem, what are other missing pieces of infrastructure, right? So like one critical like idea behind the approach was that by having this shared standard, it's a lot easier for canonical bridges to go and like build support. And by having support from canonical bridges, you get this like UX unlock where like, the Linnea bridge or the Optimism bridge or the Arbitrum bridge is minting the same version of token XYZ as like all of the other bridges are. Yeah. But in practice, like this actually just takes time, right? It takes time for people to like move on things like this. It takes time for standards to kind of get to the point where like everyone feels comfortable adopting them. So I think that that's something where like that's just a challenge overall for the whole space. It will take time for people to coalesce. That said, I mean, I think there are multiple major rollups that are like building support or like at least funding the building of support into their canonical bridges, which is super promising. Yeah, I would say one big failure on our side is that, and I think it's actually happened several times on this space. There's been multiple instances where like folks have been like, yeah, this is why we chose xERC20, and this is why like xERC20 by Connects is the right option. And like, that's actually, I think, a failure on our part and really on my part as well, that like what we should have done, and I think what we should have done a better job of, was like really positioning this as a neutral EIP more effectively. We're trying to do that now, but I think that for a lot of people who are perhaps less aware of the EIP process, or perhaps less aware of like, what does it mean to have like a public RFC versus have like a proprietary like product, don't see the difference. And so I think for that reason, maybe the approach has been somewhat held back, and we're trying to change this, but the approach has been somewhat held back by the fact that it's perhaps too connects associated at the moment.
So it sounds like the state of it is it's kind of implemented in Connects, being used by Alchemix and Renzo, and but you're doing the standard, you're pursuing the standard in parallel.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I can kind of touch on that because when we were first, basically the multi-chain thing happened, and we were like, okay, we need a new bridge, and I basically went and talked with a bunch of different bridging teams to kind of understand the approach with this fundamental idea that Alchemix is only deployed on layer 2s. And there's a mental model I have for bridges that I think needs to be more common, where like if you are bridging from like Ethereum to Solana, for example, well, those networks don't intrinsically talk to each other. So you need an intermediary, and that's like what like layer 0 or something like that provides. Or xERC or something. But at that point, you're trusting 3 different validator sets to secure your asset. You're trusting Ethereum validators, Solana validators, and layer 0 or xERC or whatever validators. And that's just the nature of it. That's just what you have to do if you're bridging Ethereum to Solana. But we were not doing that. We were only bridging Ethereum to L2s and between different L2s. So we kind of talked to Connects, and they explained their bridging system, which basically does messaging through the canonical bridges for each chain. And we were like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And then they also explained that the best way to use this system was their upcoming xERC 20 standard. And that also sounded great to us. But kind of from the get-go, we just associated, oh yeah, we're using Connect's xERC 20. And I think as I started to understand which pieces of this system were actually associated with xERC 20, versus with Connects, I saw, there is actually benefit to using this xERC 20 system with like something like layer 0 or with xERC, because if we do ever move to Solana, we can still keep the xERC 20 system and we can still use Connects. But if we want to offer faster bridging or a different bridging service or something, we could use layer 0 as well. And so, I think at first it was very integral, like, hey, xERC 20 Connects is like what we're using. And I agree with Arjun that it's going to be important to show people like, hey, xERC 20 is this bridging system that we think is advantageous in a lot of different scenarios. Separately, when you choose the bridges you're actually going to whitelist for this, consider Connects for these reasons, consider these other bridges for these other reasons, and all that.
Oh, great. Yeah, you touched on one aspect I was going to ask about, which is looking beyond the EVM ecosystem. So I guess is the answer that you're already looking into xERC 20 being kind of a multi-chain beyond the EVM ecosystem?
I personally think the logic behind it or the fundamentals behind it should be used, whether that's going to still be called xERC 20 or something else, doesn't matter. But I think it becomes even more important if you are going between other EVM chains or just other chains in general, just because of that fact that you can't use a canonical bridge necessarily, or that the canonical bridge is going to be different than just like built-in layer 2 to layer 2 messaging in Ethereum. I think at that point it becomes even more important to have control over which bridges you're actually trusting with this.
Got it. Great. That's great to hear. Yeah, it's definitely something that MetaMask is also thinking a lot about is how to create an experience that goes across both the EVM space, but also we're following our users, right? They want to be able to see their assets wherever they are. So excited to hear that as well. I guess maybe why don't we go through and I'd love to hear from each of you what your vision for the future is, either with xERC or just generally, and then what developers or like even wallet folks like myself should be doing to prepare for that vision.
Yeah, so I could jump in here. At Renzo, one of the biggest things that we're most excited about is inclusive restaking. And what we mean by inclusive restaking is, whereas with staking and liquid staking, really the only asset that you see being staked is ETH. With restaking, this new ecosystem is evolving where it's not just going to be ETH that gets staked and restaked. You're going to have different ERC20s be able to be used as staking this. Sorry about that. So you're going to be able to use other ERC20 assets to essentially be restaked and secure different kind of services. We're already seeing that on EigenLayer. So today on EigenLayer, there's 3 types of assets that could be restaked. Native ETH, and this is where we started off with the Connects team. So on all these rollups that we've integrated Connects, users can deposit ETH on the rollup. We batch and bridge it over and actually stake and restake it, and users get easy ETH back on the rollup at the time of deposit. But now what we're going to see is other assets be able to be used to restake with EigenLayer and other ecosystems that we're seeing pop up. So for example, like I said, you have ETH, but you could also use LST to restake, and that is significant because LSTs are ERC20s. So today, Renzo supports SCETH and Wrap BETH from Binance. So you'll be able to see us start building out integrations with the Connects team, where from like BNB chain, or if SCETH is on any kind of rollups, we'll be able to take that as a deposit asset and be able to use it as collateral on Renzo to also back easy ETH. And then the third type of asset that we just recently saw EigenLayer, and they're doing a phased rollout of it, is the Eigen token itself. And what that is indicating to the market very early, I don't think a lot of people have picked up on it, is the ability to do dual token staking and essentially these additional assets that in the past you weren't able to use for shared security. So at Renzo, we refer to that as inclusive restaking because it's inclusive of all assets. And you're going to see a lot of really cool new DeFi primitives essentially evolve from that ability to use any kind of ERC20 token to secure different kind of networks. And of course, we'll be building that out with the Connects team, and you need liquidity to go from the rollups and those assets to mainnet, and make sure there's deep liquidity to be able to bridge back and forth.
Great. And anything that developers, wallet builders should be thinking about to prepare for that capability?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we're going to see is, especially like when we talk about staking and restaking, we're still in the mindset that the only asset that could be staked is ETH. So when you start thinking about user experiences and the type of LRT assets that you're going to see, it's going to evolve, and we definitely need to make sure that not only on the Connect side from a bridge perspective, but wallet providers really understand the type of deposit assets and how they need to be bridged and how they need to be communicated to users, essentially, right? It's a new DeFi primitive. It's a new use case that we haven't seen before, so it's going to unlock a lot of different problems. Even, when you look at MetaMask and MetaMask portfolio, we're kind of going through those growing pains at Renzo today. How do you display this information? How do you communicate to users that they could stake other assets? We're not used to being able to do that and actually generate real rewards or real yield from actually being able to secure services, right? So you're going to see DeFi just get more complicated in the early days. If you look at the Renzo app today, we're going through those growing pains right now, especially as you're solving for the cold start problem, and user experience is going to have to be super important, as well as security of how those assets move around between mainnet and rollups.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, like the most user-friendly form of bridging is to just let unlimited bridging happen. And I think that's a bad idea for a few different reasons. But the thing is, people don't, like, usability is very visible. Security is not visible until you need it. And so a lot of times security presents itself as just annoyance to a user. And so, like I think with xERC 20, it's generally going to work, except for if there's some event that puts the token up against the rate limit, the bridging's not going to work until the rate limit resolves. And just stuff like that is potential user friction. And I think any sort of like warning errors or anything that can help users just understand, like, yes, this doesn't work right now, but that's security to make sure that this keeps working for a long time. So yeah, it's definitely always hard to balance security with UI, UX, and I think xERC 20 has done a really good job of it, but it still takes a little bit of education. And I think on the wallet side of things, that just means like good warnings or errors whenever you run into a scenario where you can't necessarily do what you normally can for some sort of security reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think beyond that, there's another, I guess there's like a host of problems that we aimed to solve with the approach. And I think contrary to what a lot of people expect, like Connext doesn't really like directly benefit, because we're not like a sort of like, our focus is more around making the user experience as good as possible. And like, we do this using a technology called Intents, which means that we have these like off-chain actors that are going like fronting liquidity to make transfers happen across chains. And those off-chain actors then need to figure out how to like rebalance their liquidity across chains to get their capital back to where it needs to be able to make more transfers happen. And I think that our goal behind xERC 20 was to like create this like backbone where you can allow for the seamless rebalancing of liquidity between chains, and then you can have protocols like Connext and Across and a bunch of others go and make these transactions happen much more efficiently, right? Without having to like navigate as much complexity associated with rebalancing. In practice, like I think xERC 20 has had an enormous benefit, especially cases like Easy ETH and ALUSD and ALETH, because like when you transfer those assets, the experience is just quite different, right? It's just meaningfully different to be able to go and transfer like, $1 million worth of Easy ETH across chains and like pays effectively zero fees for it, and like take no slippage or anything like that. But then the flip side of it is that there's like kind of like while that sort of like solves for a certain amount of fragmentation, so like fragmentation of asset representations, for instance, that we talked about earlier, there's actually a different kind of fragmentation that still exists. And this is actually the secondary user experience challenge that we're now starting to deal with and think through how to solve. So this is one that's actually a little bit of a deeper cut, and it's an interesting one to think about, where even with xERC 20 today, if for example, Alchemix, allows Connext to be the bridge for ALUSD on like Optimism and Arbitrum, but then wants to expand to, some other chain that like Connext doesn't support, like Scroll, for instance. xERC 20 allows Alchemix to go and deploy their assets to Scroll and deploy the right representations of it. And then they can go and like work with whatever bridges they want to be able to go and support bridging to Scroll. The challenge is, how do you then do bridging from any chain to any other chain, right? So like they're supporting bridging with their assets from Optimism to Arbitrum and back, using Connext, and then they're supporting, bridging to and from Ethereum and Scroll using the Scroll canonical bridge or using like Layer 0 or something like that. But there's, in that case, there's actually no pathway to go from Arbitrum to Scroll. So there's this like secondary fragmentation issue that gets created where it's like, you kind of need like a service provider to support everything that you want to support. But then that's like inherently a challenge, right? And that gets back to kind of like the core fragmentation issue we see today, which is like not every bridge is going to support every chain. Not every bridge is going to have liquidity everywhere. This is the problem that I think we're now kind of focused on solving. We have a good potential solution to it that I think we'll be talking about a lot more over the course of next month. But I think it involves having like a better mechanism for allowing for bridges and for specifically like the liquidity providers of bridges to be able to negotiate with each other, to be like, okay, you're going to do this part of this transaction and I'm going to do this part of this transaction. We're still going to get the ultimate right outcome for the protocol and for the user and for the token issuer. But, you know, we don't necessarily need to like go and support every single ecosystem. We don't need to have liquidity on every single chain.
That sounds exciting. Wow. I can't wait to hear as you get further into that kind of case of like being able to do like any to any kind of bridging. Let's I think we've got a few minutes left. I think it's probably time for some audience Q&A. And let's see if we have some questions. And sorry, I'm seeing if I
While we're waiting, can you add a speaker? Oh, he is a speaker again. Okay, never mind.
Okay, yeah.
I'm back.
Nice. If anyone wants to raise their hand, questions.
Looks like a quiet audience.
Yeah, no worries. Well,
they just want their POAPs.
Sorry?
They just want their POAPs.
Yeah. Maybe why don't we just go around and any projects that are on folks' radars that you're particularly interested in. It's always good to hear from the folks who are most plugged into the industry.
I gotta run quick, so I'll take this one first. I'm following a few different things in lending. Basically, Gauntlet is making a service where you can basically define a yield strategy that has a manager where they're whitelisted to basically manage your funds into any predefined yield tokens, yield strategies, asset swaps, stuff like that. So I think we're finally seeing these products where like I can have someone manage my funds while severely limiting what they can do with them. So I think that's really what a big promise of DeFi is. And I think it's kind of this idea of like modular lending in DeFi, which Morpho and Euler are also doing a lot of really cool stuff in, basically breaking apart lending into all its different components so that you can piece them together in all these different ways for different use cases, which ultimately creates a lot of ways to do really cool things with DeFi without giving up custody of your assets to people. So that's what I'm following.
Is that the ERA product?
Yeah, Gauntlet ERA, AERA, and then Morpho and Euler are also doing some cool stuff in that space. Yeah, that's what I got.
Very cool.
So on the Renzo side, I could kind of chime in. The piece that we're really excited about, and without like naming any kind of specific projects, it's going back to this narrative that you're going to continue hear us talking about, where there's ecosystems that are being developed, whether it's Bitcoin L2s on ETH mainnet, but now that assets have the ability, different ERC20 assets have the ability to be used as security to secure additional services and get restaked. We think that you're going to see an explosion of essentially two things. You're going to see an explosion of restaking, and the narrative is just going to get much bigger because it's not just going to be ETH or LST tokens. You're going to see stables. You're going to see Bitcoin L2s and Bitcoin get restaked. And then on the flip side, what we're really excited about is now that there's this new genre of yield-bearing assets like LRTs and even USDCE, we think that as new rollups and even L3s start launching, similar to what blasted with xETH, you're going to see these ecosystems want to build on top of EasyETH, and with rollups being commoditized in the sense that the cost is going to go down. It's already going down. You're seeing, a lot of different projects saying they're launching their own L2s. That is a symptom of restaking and what EigenLayer is doing to bring down the cost to launch and maintain rollups. We think you're just going to see an explosion of L2s and rollups launch, but they're going to be very different. Instead of large ecosystems, you're going to see them as like single purpose apps, just because it's so much cheaper for them to run that they don't have to monetize their users and provide them, 10, 15 different kind of things to do in DeFi. They'll be able to actually focus on, whether it's a perp dex or a lending protocol or something else. And we're just excited to see the adoption of EasyETH being used as a baseline asset. And the way I talk about it is if you have money in your wallet, do you want an asset that is not earning yield, or do you prefer to have something that even when it's idle, it's earning some kind of yield for you? And that's how we think about EasyETH.
Lucas, every time you talk about this, I get super, super excited, both about Renzo and just about like the future of the space, that like we're going to be able to like really, really aggressively decouple the demand for security from having like actual security providers, and work on financializing all of it, and then run the future of the financial infrastructure of the space on top of all of it. That was just such a, I remember in the early days when we were first starting to talk to each other, you had mentioned this, and it was just like a huge unlock in my brain where I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like restaking can and should be the kind of like the base, it's like basically bonds for this ecosystem, on top of which you can build like entirely new type of financial infrastructure.
Yeah, everything's going to look different. The restaking narrative was massive in Q1 and Q2. We've seen a little bit of a cool down right now. So I'm still trying to, in my head, organize when some of these narratives and options are going to happen. And they're just going to come in these massive tsunamis, right? Nobody expected restaking to pick up in January the way it did. And now everybody kind of knows about it. But it's just opening up Pandora's box, essentially, to all these other things that are capable. And with Renzo, we just want to be thought leaders in the space and build alongside, people like MetaMask and everybody else and the Connects team here, and just be there early and be able to bring value to users in the space. So.
Yeah, that's cool. From Alchemix, I'm always really happy to see new primitives emerge, especially yield-bearing ones, because we like to process yield and then deliver it in different ways for our users. And to that effect, I really am, just to echo the thoughts here, most excited about EigenLayer, not the points and stuff like that, but like more so just the ability, as was mentioned earlier, to build new things, whether this is just like another layer that's secured by EigenLayer security restake ETH, or if it's something entirely new that could be enabled from it. One recent experiment that's going to happen soon is the Bitcoin ticker Bitcoin Harry Potter Obama Sonic Inu. They're going to be doing a restaking experiment using their Bitcoin token and I think that's really interesting. It's kind of funny, kind of comical that they're one of the first people to be publicly launching something, but it's also kind of cool because it's permissionless in that sense. On top of that, though, something that's kind of fun that I've liked is this app on Base. I don't even know who made it or anything. I just discovered it earlier in the week. It's called worldpvp.co. And so essentially it's like a, excuse my language, a shitcoin trading platform, but there's one token per country in the world. And so there's like a market cap leaderboard. And at the end of a round, whichever token has the highest market cap, according to the bonding curve that they're on, they get a privilege to use a nuclear weapon on another country, which would eliminate them from the game. And in that, when it happens, it also drains all the liquidity from that country in their bonding curve, and then distributes it to the people who nuked, and then also to other people using the app as well. And, it's silly and it's dumb, but it's also really funny. They have like a troll box, and like, China was threatening to nuke America, and then Americans bought a bunch of China and then became the president of China. And yeah, it's all sorts of shenanigans that are happening. So I think it's been one of the silliest things I've seen on chain, and that captures kind of the spirit of the current meta of, people gambling on, like meme tokens and stuff like that, but in a more fun, like, way, I think, so I think it's pretty cool.
My wife's gonna another reason just to be at my computer late at night.
Yeah, I was busy on this PvP thing. Yeah.
What is it called?
Worldpvp.co.
Worldpvp.co. All right, they're gonna get a bunch of inbound traffic.
Well, this has been super fun. I know we're up on time. Oh, did anyone want to say anything else? Arjun, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, we can just wrap up. That's all right.
Great. Yeah, I hope this has been helpful for everybody. I think we've learned a lot about the xERC 20 token standard, what it's all about, a lot of the progress, the reasoning behind it. And hope you've all gotten a little bit of taste of the future as well. It sounds like there's a lot of momentum around this effort, and restaking and cross-chain bridging and all kind of this whole new future. So look out for some cool updates coming from Connect's, Renzo, and Alchemix teams. Again, thank you to our speakers for joining, and to the audience for jumping in here. Thanks so much. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.